Committee on Tuesday, June 18th at 5 o'clock. Roll call, Alder Galvin.
Here.
Alder Johnson.
Here.
Alder Hugfest.
Here.
And myself are present. Entertain them.
Move to approve. Second.
Do we want any amendments to the agenda?
I thought you wanted to move it, I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you did?
You want-
Yes.
you
Can
wanna-
I actually do that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. I will motion to amend number 8 up to the first item of regular business.
Second that.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So motion to approve the agenda as amended. Do I have to-
So moved.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Entertain motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to regular business. Number 8, for consideration of possible action to bring back the contract with Security Pro Intel for security guard services held on June 4th, 2024, Finance Committee meeting to include a City Hall security plan. Staff?
I guess the request was to bring this back with a security plan. There is a brief security plan included in the packet, and so then we have brought back this, the security guard's proposal. I think there was an email that came out from our Chief of Operations last week that gave you some backup information on some surveys and some other information that they had shared with the council.
Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we sent this back, I think the hope was that we would get more information on a couple of fronts. One is a better understanding of threats maybe that are being received, probably by our police department, I would imagine, right? What are the things that are necessitating or prompting the requests? And then the other piece is just, I think, a more thorough understanding of overall costs to secure City Hall. We knew, I think the security guard was a piece of it, but it was presumed there were other pieces. And I think the hope from the committee was that we would get a more holistic understanding of what to expect in terms of future budgetary requests. So I think that's what we were looking for. So maybe Chief, maybe we start with you?
Sure.
If you could just give us some background and better understanding of kind of how we've gotten to this point to kind of get the recommendation for armed security at City Hall.
Sure. So this conversation has been going on for quite a while, and the document that you have in front of you, the City Hall security plan, actually dates back to December of last year. So for a couple years now, we have recognized two issues. One is there are a number of calls for service at this facility, and we had some data back when we originally had these discussions about that. And then we've had concerns raised from city staff that works in this building about safety issues that they see. And then I can tell you that what I see and what our team at the police department sees when we've gotten into this issue is some fairly significant security vulnerabilities in this building. We are running the City Hall for the third largest city in the state, and there isn't really a security presence here. We rely on camera feeds that go to our shift supervisor's office at our facility, and really I can't guarantee you that anyone is watching those at any given time because the people who work in that role are often doing other things. I think we have vulnerabilities here in terms of physical safety of people coming and going from City Hall, and also the safety of the property itself. And so the idea here is in this plan, and recognizing that there's a cost associated with this, that we're not going to be able to implement this entire plan all at once, but a good first step is to have that physical presence in the building. So when people come in, and the idea is that this doesn't have to be a very standoffish or aggressive presence, but somebody just to say hello to you when you come into City Hall and maybe help you find what you're looking for, because also a lot of times members of the community come in here who don't come here very often and might be confused about where to go. Eventually, it's our recommendation that we go to more of a system where the first floor is where as much of the public-facing functions that take place in this building as possible are located. And then if you need to get to the other floors, that we actually secure those. And that the security person would be the one to help you get to where you need to go if you have an appointment or something on one of those floors. But the first phase in this, just given the resource constraints, is to have that security presence in the building.
Okay. So one of the things I found interesting, and this is from the email that Joe had sent us, overall, it looks like our staff feels safe working at City Hall, which is
Yes.
which is a good thing. It was interesting. I think it was overwhelmingly positive in that regard. But obviously, folks that maybe feel a little bit underprepared for how to react to a situation. I'm not sure that this would be maybe a question for you or perhaps Chief Fultz, but just maybe what we're doing from a training perspective, a preparedness perspective. Would that be you, Chief Fultz?
You want to take it? I could always bring a chair up there too.
Sure. I'll make room.
And again, it's great that, I want to emphasize, I think that's really important, right? That our employees do feel safe, because that is obviously key priority. But, if there was one, I guess, gap that I noticed in the survey, that was probably it.
Yeah, so our risk manager works closely with the police department for those active threat trainings. And I think at this point in time, it's mainly just having that good communication, because I think the police department are the experts in the security assessment and the security, training for our employees. So we just work closely with them to develop those trainings for our employees.
And when do you think you would anticipate that would roll out?
Well, we have had active threat training for our employees. We also had training on effective communication, how to diffuse situations. So you'll see I think what happens is we have trainings with the police department, especially on active threats, but we also have turnover at the city. So you'll have some employees that have had that training, some that have not. So I think we just have to work with PD to get a better annual or biannual cycle for the training.
Okay.
Should that be part of onboarding? The standard security and, accessing your car, where you should go, where you shouldn't go. I mean, that way, most companies, I think, do their training, onboarding always with security.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. We could film a video and show the video to our employees. And it won't be as thorough as an in-depth training with PD, but it's a good start to have something like that.
It's going to be like one of those cheesy 80 videos.
Some of those skills are things that you want to do on an ongoing basis too, like evacuations and
Yes.
those kind of things. But, to your point, Alder, about the feeling of safety in the building, that you're right, that is a very good thing. There was a lot of desire to see a security presence in the building.
Yeah,
in the
and I was
same
going to get to
survey.
that, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
And, while it's always good that people feel safe in the facility, there's that's an important thing, but also I think it's important to look at the risks that your facility has, because just because people feel safe doesn't mean that we're doing everything that we can necessarily to mitigate the kind of risks that we know exist in facilities like this in 2024. And, the security and safety landscape in public facilities has changed certainly over the last 5 years, and really over the last 15 or 20, to where, we have to think about risks that we didn't have to think about in the past. And, while I like that people feel safe, I also strongly recommend that we be clear-headed about the kind of risks and even some simple things that we can do to mitigate the very real risks that exist.
Do you have perspective to share perhaps on why we would outsource this versus having the PD handle it?
Yeah, I think it's more cost-effective. Police officer, just what it takes to train a police officer, because of all of the things that we need them to be able to go do, is more than you need for somebody to provide security services in a facility generally. For example, we spend a lot of time in the police academy teaching police officers how to respond to domestic disturbances in people's homes. That's not something that someone assigned to this facility would necessarily encounter much of, or do traffic safety work, or search and seizure rules. Police officers have lawful authority to write search warrants, which is not something that I would think that a security person in a facility would need. So you're going to get what you need a lot more cheaply, and save those police officers for other uses that are more appropriate.
Who would manage this contract? Is it you or
The Parks Department,
Parks, okay.
because it's a parks facility.
Yep, okay. I have more questions, but I don't want to hog up all the time.
One of the things that I noticed in the survey was after work, and I'm assuming this was done in July and people were still concerned. Is there anything, I didn't see anything in the plan that's addressing if people are afraid to leave or if they got to go over, do we have anything within City Hall where we try to get people to walk together or?
Yeah, I would have to defer to the Public Works Department on that with some of the upgrades and changes they made to the parking ramps. But I can tell you that I don't believe there's any official plan, but employees and departments typically will walk together to the parking ramp. I think there's been times where if an employee that typically doesn't attend these types of meetings, but they park in the ramp, they usually leave work around when it's light out, and they bring their car over here and park over here. So there's other options we can do to make them feel safer.
Okay. And that's something we can also include within the training and stuff.
We could, yeah, we could make that more formalized, kind of some tips.
Because I think the other thing that I noticed in here, some of this just looks like communication, where we just need to make sure that we're communicating, and maybe on an annual basis, everybody has to go through some type of security type reminders.
Yeah, I think some improvements
Online.
can be communication, but then also just there's some good recommendations on I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but like pamphlets or just things you can flip through for each department to have or each employee to have, so they have that kind of cheat sheet on what to do in certain emergency situations.
That's true, because when it's an emergency, your brain goes sometimes.
Are we looking at anything for the parking lot surrounding the outside of the building? Cameras or any kind of security related to that, escorting customers out to their car, employees out to their cars late at night after hours, council meetings? I know we have an officer here, but there's been occasions when confrontations have taken place at council and some people are concerned about going out in the parking lot at night by themselves. Would this be a 9 to 5 thing? Or on occasions, we'd have them run late when we knew there were going to be meetings and things like that?
I think the contract allows for us to have some flexibility when the security guard will be here. And I think it's up to us whether or not we want to have more of a police presence at the common council meetings, or if we want to have the police presence and also the security guard. There might also be certain times throughout the year, like the joint personnel finance meeting, that's not a common council meeting, but meetings we know are going to run later, we could always schedule with the security guard or the company. So it just comes down to cost, right, and kind of weighing the benefits of the safety versus the cost of having the guard here.
And as to the training, I'd like to see something set, that we're going to have this kind of training X times of the year or every other year or something like that, so that people aren't, so have it as when they're hired, as Alder Hinkfist brought up, but also practice makes perfect. And if you only practice it once, when it happens, people are going to panic, they're not going to be focused in on what they should be doing, and by practicing, I think we're going to have a better outcome in the end. And then, have we thought about how we're going to dress this person? At the federal courthouse, they have them in slacks, a white shirt, a tie, and a sport coat. It's a uniform, but they're armed there at the federal courthouse. Yet Social Security offices here at the federal courthouse and out on Dousman and military, they have uniformed armed guards. So I'm just wondering if we've given any thought to that.
Yeah, in the quote, they're specified to have a sports jacket with a logo on their lapel with standard, I believe, khaki. So it is a uniform, but it's kind of casual.
Right, exactly. It's not as out there as a uniform would be.
Correct.
Right, it's kind of like the federal courthouse.
Yes. All right, thank you.
I do have a question. The risk that you speak of that we're experiencing Do you think that warrants year-round security or during certain times of the year when we are busier here?
I think it's a year-round issue because that risk exists year-round. You know, without, I want to be careful not to get so detailed that I give people ideas of where our vulnerabilities are, things like that, but just broadly, look at the issue of active threats, such as active shooter incidents. Those can happen year-round. That's a risk in 2024 that we didn't think much about, say, 20 years ago. Or some of the other security vulnerabilities that we see because we're open for business year-round. I think it's a year-round issue. I don't think there are particular times of the year that are just in terms of risk, that are riskier than others. There are some things that we do here occasionally that might draw more energy and more attention to a specific event that happens in City Hall, like, you know, a council meeting where there's an issue where there's a lot of energy around it, but I think you deal with those things as the individual situations that they are, but just the baseline level of risk in this facility, I think it's the same all the time.
Okay, thank you. And then other things that were noted in the security plan, like, you know, having the things that the public needs to access kind of kept on first floor. I know we started moving some of that around. What are the costs associated with that? And are we going to be giving up some of that by hiring this person this year within this budget?
And that's, the costs of that are a work in progress. The way we chose to roll this out was we knew with what we were able to budget for this year, that would, the security guard contract itself is probably going to consume most of that. And so, you know, I would defer to Director Ditchite on exactly what goes where in the facility and how much that costs. But, you know, we felt like because we knew we couldn't implement the whole plan all at once, the highest priority went towards getting this security contract in place.
Okay, and I know this is a little off topic, but not really, because I'm trying to make a comparison. So you talked about active shooter threats. In our schools, we have RSOs assigned. They cover multiple schools, correct? We don't have
Right.
a police presence every day at the schools, correct?
That's true.
So I guess I'm trying to understand how we see those threats actually, unfortunately, very often in schools, but we still don't have a person there, but we're worrying about City Hall every day of the week. So I have a little concern about that.
And I think the reason why that is, that we don't have a police officer in every school, is because we can't afford it. You know, the cost of that with the number of schools that we have and what a police officer costs for a year, we do the best with what we were able to do with the resources that we have. We also have a plan and we have regular training for what we'll do. God forbid that happens in one of our schools. Our schools invest a lot of work, and we've seen it pay off more than once in making sure their staff is ready and has a plan and has a contingency for dealing with that problem if it arises, and then that they're also, they've invested a lot in other things that they can afford, that they can do to mitigate that risk. And so I think it's, I totally get what you're saying, and I respect the parallel that you're drawing there, but I think that, you know, this is something that we have the resources to do in this one facility that, you know, unfortunately our partners at the school district don't have to do in every facility they have, and so they mitigate that risk in the best way that they can with the resources they have, and we work with them a lot on those issues, if that makes sense.
It does, but I guess in my opinion then, that's what I'm trying to ask is, couldn't we almost mirror what schools do with training and education and have that same, I mean, we're not far from the police department. We do have, when I did my ride-along, you know, you're assigning a certain amount of personnel to each section of the city. So there is always an officer, or I shouldn't say always, but for the most part in different areas of the city. So if something were to happen here and the staff were trained to react like the schools are, does having someone here really warrant the price? Or are we better off getting more police officers in the school where they're split between 4 schools. I guess I'm trying to balance out, I know it's 2 different
Yeah.
budgets, but I'm looking at, this is going to be an ongoing expense. So I want to make sure we're actually putting those resources in an area that it's really needed and warranted. Or can we do more education and communication and training among staff to get the same results?
So, we're not the ones who dictate to the school what their school safety and security plan is. The school district is an independent entity that has to make its own decisions and trade-offs about how they use their resources. What I would say is, that is certainly a conversation to lean into with them as much as they want to lean into it with us. And, I meet regularly with the superintendent and the security director with the schools to talk about those issues. But as the city government, we really have a responsibility to our employees as well to keep them safe. And it's, these are city resources. All of our school resource officers are paid for by the school district.
Okay.
That doesn't come out of the general fund budget. And so I will always have lots of professional opinions about other things that we can do to help the schools be safe. To me, it's a both and conversation that, we have employees in this facility who, they've made their feelings pretty clear. We've taken a look, along with some public safety partners of ours, at where we have vulnerabilities in this facility. And so I would just suggest that maybe we look at those 2 things. I get the parallel, but I would recommend looking at them as really 2 different situations. Because
Yeah.
if the city of Green Bay was responsible for running the school district, this would be a different conversation. But that's another entity it's their responsibility to take that on, and
Yeah.
we'll work with them on that.
And that I
at the
understand it.
same time, we've got this issue in our own
Right.
facility.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say we take over that plan, more just
Mhm.
if that's working for them, the things that they've come up with and implemented. I mean, we had safety plans in school since we were all in school, so this is nothing new. So my point is
Well, speak for
teaching,
yourself.
kind
I
of
guess-
echoing what they're doing.
I think most schools, I don't know if every school in Green Bay, they have like a visitor check-in. Where City Hall, we don't have that. You can kind of just walk in, go wherever you want. So I think the schools kind of have that check-in, that kind of gatekeeper right away, whereas we don't have that at City Hall. So if there's a different way we can put funding in for a gatekeeper or restructure the first floor, we can do that. But our thought is have a security guard who will be that first person of contact. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there too.
Yep, and that's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to figure out, what makes more sense to implement first. Is it securing first floor and limiting access to people first? And how much does that cost? Because it's hard for me to approve a dollar amount when I don't, you gave us the plan, but it's hard to say, to completely switch over first floor, it's going to cost us X dollars, and this is how we should, the best order to do it.
And that's why we haven't come to you with that request yet. We recognized all of these things that we believe we need to do our due diligence to keep this facility safe and to address the vulnerabilities that we see. But we can't afford to do it all at once, and so we had to prioritize what comes first. And this was what we prioritized to come first, because there's a lot of moving parts to rearranging the insides of City Hall. It's a lot faster for us to get a contract and at least get a security provider on the site while we go through that much longer process of identifying what we need to do, how much it's going to cost, and then we will come to you with a request to pay for that once we know.
Okay.
Chief, comparing City Hall to schools, 2 different kinds of targets. Without giving anything away, it'd be much harder to get into a school today than it would be to get into City Hall. Is that, would you say that's?
No, it's absolutely true. The schools will have one entrance where you can get in, or even some of them, like you will ring a doorbell and someone will come to you and you can't even get into the facility. And then there's the expectation that you're gonna go to that gatekeeper in the office. And you have you really have school staff performing a lot of the role that we're anticipating contracting with a security person to provide here.
Right, if we were to make City Hall harden like one of our area public schools, would the cost not be much higher than what we're anticipating doing? And including the fact that we'd also have to have staff to handle those duties of addressing everybody at a door and then escorting them in and everything else?
Yeah, I don't know that there would be, I mean, you would still need somebody to perform that role. What the schools appear to have done is they have their staff performing that role, but we would need to identify who it is that performs that role, and I don't know enough about other departments' operations to say who that might be from one of the other departments, so
Right.
you probably end up in the same place.
Okay, and then for Director Distich, this security plan, is this something we're gonna do, or is this something that's gonna float out there for a while and then maybe not do it and then maybe do it?
Well, our hope is to implement it in phases, so. you know.
Well, I understand that, but this isn't, what we're seeing here is what we envision being the end product. These aren't just suggestions or things, we'll see what happens, or we don't have enough money so we don't do it ever type thing.
Well, I think, just if I could jump in real quick, it's important to note that this is already happening. So we've already moved purchasing and payroll off of the first floor. So it's going to be an ongoing
Okay.
process as we continue to move operations that aren't public-facing up to, higher floors, the likeliest choice being fourth, because there's the most room there. But this is not something we're waiting to do. And so I think Director Ditchai could also talk about, some of the costs associated with some of the incremental improvements that we've already made on the
Right.
fourth floor
But
to
at
accommodate those.
the end of the day, this will be an end product that everyone will recognize when they look at this, that that's exactly what's happened here, to make this place safer and more secure.
Right.
All right, thank
And
you.
also, the other piece of it, the other side of the coin, is to make first floor more accessible in a way, more public facing.
Sure.
So that a meeting like this could actually, take place on the first floor, or members of the public could rent the flexible space downstairs for community meetings that they'd like to have. So it's, kind of a twofold initiative.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
Alder Johnson?
Yeah, there's, and I think part of this conversation that we've talked about in the past is sort of there's the security discussion, then there's the customer service facing component. And, one of the things I think that I've talked about in the past at least, and I think staff has also suggested this, but it's the notion of kind of more of a one-stop shop, right? Where you can come in and you can pay your parking ticket, you can get your park permit, you can do whatever it is, right? And having staff that's adequately trained to handle all of those requests rather than sending them to every individual floor right now. So I think to your point, Alder Galvin, we can sit back and wait for when staff tells us, or we can direct it as part of the motion.
Right.
So, one of the things that I would like to see, I'm inclined to support this today, and I think Alder Grant raises some really great questions. And I think we ought to be thinking, seriously about the fiscal impact. The one thing that I see, though, is that this is the lowest barrier to entry right now to secure City Hall, right? We can do it quickly, we can do it, but it's also something we can pull back, if necessary, once we can implement some of these other things that are going to probably be more costly and take more time. And I think that there are some incidents that we have seen, even as council. I mean, you may recall, the one incident at our meeting even, right? Where it's kind of like, gosh, that's the kind of thing that was it during our meeting. Now folks in City Hall are kind of dealing with this every single day. Particularly, I think, in our first floor operation. So I'm inclined to support this today because I think we need to do that. But one of the things I would direct as part of a motion, I don't know that I'd have this piece in the motion, but Mayor, you're here in the room. I really think we need to look at focusing on that customer service experience and how we properly staff that. Someone brought it up, I don't remember who.
Well, I think I brought it up when we were talking last Monday, that part of the vision here really is to have, administrative staff coupled with the security staff, so that we really can have that one-stop shop on the first
Right.
floor. Or if not that, then the administrative staff could help them navigate the building and take them to the right department.
No, and one of the things I was going to get at, though, somebody mentioned to me that there was discussion maybe about rotating departments and
Yes.
taking turns. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that per se. I'd rather just have sort of a focused and trained individual that can handle all that, but that's kind of your
Yeah, and I
thing,
mean, the
right?
reason that we had chatted about that a little bit is because one of the biggest frustrations that we hear oftentimes is people sometimes get the runaround from department to department, so long-term vision is more of a cross-training approach to frontline administrative staff, so they can sort of take care of anything regardless of department, at least the, the simple tasks.
Sure.
So that's the thinking behind that.
Okay. And then sort of the city hall improvements. This is the part that I'm mulling over, maybe looking for some staff feedback on. I think it should just be part of the CIP. I think it should come back during the CIP and the bonding process, and I think that's the appropriate time for us to address that. It gives staff a little bit of time to really kind of get their arms around what that looks like. And where I'm trying to figure out, and I'm looking at Director Ellenbecker, if that is maybe an appropriate ad hoc facilities committee discussion, because part of that committee was really to take a look at that CIP for City Hall, and does this become part of that discussion? So that way you do have an oversight committee that, that can properly address some of those required enhancements, along with the other things, right, that have been discussed as part of that committee. So unless there's objection, it seems to me that makes the most sense to kind of flow through that process.
I think now too, Director Ditchite probably has a better understanding of what some of these improvements might cost because of the work that's been done on fourth floor to accommodate purchasing and payroll. So I think we're in a good place to give some better estimates for CIP.
And I think there's people we can look at. I worked at the federal courthouse for a year. We got trained on how to interact with the public when they came in the door, because there's also law offices there, there's social security testing, all that kind of stuff. So we interact with all those individuals, but there was also security procedures set up within that building, and layered. And so the staff there understands how they're supposed to act, what they're supposed to do, and how they're supposed to go about doing it. And I think as we get into this, we're probably going to find that we have to do a little bit more than just there's going to be a guy down there greeting people. I mean, I think it's going to be a much more involved job than that. You don't want them leaving that position to escort people to other places. So yeah, you do have to look at either using current employees, but getting them up to speed on how to do it and how to do it properly, so we're not offending people and we're making it easier, or just as easy for the public to do business with the city at the same time.
And at the same time, I think we need to establish security policies and procedures that are known on day one when somebody is hired here. What is the expectations with the badges? What is the expectation moving between floors? Anything, knowing is there somebody there that's gonna walk me out if I'm fear? Because I really think a lot of it has to do with communication. And in my history, every year there was you were taught security when you came in, and then every year you had to go and recertify through a program. And I think that that's really important, so our employees understand security and they can also react and know what they need to do.
Derek?
Okay, two things. So one thing, we do have like a welcome desk as people come in and no one's there, so maybe that would be a place where, somebody could be stationed to direct people. So that would be nice. And then on a different note, the safety plan includes, it's listed as emergency evacuation plan. And honestly, I'd like to see that like yesterday. As city council, we have not gone through an evacuation plan, and I think that would be helpful for us and for all of the staff. And it can also include emergency in case of bad weather. Where do you go for that? So it'd be kind of a twofold thing. So again, education, training, and you do it in times where you don't need it, so that when you do, everybody's just calm and they do it, they go where they need to go. So I really would like to see this implemented as soon as possible.
Mayor?
Just to that point about the welcome desk, that's part of the plan as well, just to make some slight improvements to the welcome desk. It doesn't function that well for this purpose right now, because you have to sort of jump over the desk if you were to, greet somebody or help them navigate the building. So, we've been talking, Director Ditchite has, I think, been in conversation with a local cabinetry firm that they could make some upgrades to that, so that it'd be much more functional for us.
Any other discussion?
I'd make a motion to approve and direct staff to bring the the facility improvements to the Ad hoc Facilities Committee for consideration in our annual capital improvement plan update.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we're back to item number 1. Consideration with possible action to approve the purchase of 36 LifePak 1000 defibrillators for the cost of $83,633.04.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, for consideration with possible action to approve the budget amendment resolution for $40,000 to move from DPW salaries to DPW consulting to cover surveying consulting expenses due to vacant ROW specialists.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 3, for consideration with possible action to approve adding all languages for translation versus Spanish only for the American Rescue Plan Act 92015 translator request.
I assume this is just to give us some capacity so that it's not exclusively Spanish, it can be any language that's necessary?
Yes.
Yep, okay, move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 4, for consideration with possible action to approve staff recommended reallocation of ARPA grant capital improvement and organizational priorities for a total allocation of $10 million and entering MOU for corresponding allocations as needed. Any discussion? staff?
I think it'd be nice to get an overview.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'd like an overview if you don't mind.
Yeah, so in front of you, there's really 2 motions. We have to keep the capital separate from the economic impact allocations. First one is for the $10 million, which have less restrictions on it. And it's really just tweaking some of the allocations that have already been approved by the council. And some items went over for a few dollars, some are maybe gonna go under a little bit. So it's really just tweaking them to firming them up so that we can hit our deadline of 12/31/24 for the dollars all being obligated.
So just for point of clarity, particularly for Alder Hinkfest, I mean, these dollars need to be committed or obligated by the end of the year, but you have until the end of 2026 to spend them. But that means once January 1st rolls around, you can't change
Right, the
like where it's
treasury,
going to go anymore. So that's why this is important.
the treasurer came back and gave us some new direction on either it can be a contract, a purchase order, or they have something called the MOU, and then they gave us some direction on how you can put this memorandum of understanding together to show that you still have intentions of spending, how you're gonna plan to spend it. But again, we have to have them locked in. Treasury is starting to request some of that additional information on our quarterly reporting, so the July reporting, we're gonna have to put more of this information into the system. Again, they just wanna make sure that the dollars are spent, and obviously, we don't want them to do any clawbacks on any dollars. So we're just trying to lock it in, and it gets approved some of these small tweaks and changes to the original allocations.
So the entire amount's been allocated there, and it has to be allocated by December 31st of this year.
Correct, it has to be obligated, so not only allocated, you have to have it, again, in a purchase order, a contract, or you have to have it in some kind of memo of understanding. It has to be locked, and we've had it for a couple of years now, so, this is really our drop dead to get that, decided how it's going to get spent. For your sake, one.
Right, so I'm looking here going an unallocated 222, but we reallocated that money somewhere else?
The here staff recommendation is in that middle column.
So this is where we allocated, right?
Yep.
This is staff recommendation, so either we're increasing or decreasing, or in some cases adding something brand
Yep.
new, right? And then your revised is on the far right.
Where are we adding brand new?
Correct, anything that's bold and
Oh,
italics.
bold.
Yep.
It looks like we lost that line on that first page, but yes, anything that's italics and bold, these are new items that have been added to. In some places where maybe an item hasn't been underspent, we added a few additional items here to allocate those dollars. Again, the reason why there's 2 pages is the $10 million, as I said, has less restrictions. It can be used for capital improvements where the economic impact has more restrictions around them. So that's why we try to keep them separate. We can only reallocate within those 2 buckets.
Alderich?
So the security barricades, is that for the draft, or what is the 400,000 for security? Am I on the wrong?
That's the next item.
That's the next one, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
I assume like east side, I mean, some of these are a little obvious, but like some, east side salt shed, that's a big capital improvement. I assume by putting it in here, it at least saves us then on the bonding request.
That is correct, and there's some urgent needs there, which of course the director could talk to you about it, but yes, it either be bonded for or in this way could be done sooner
Yeah,
and
and
not
then-
wait for the 2025 bonding.
Yeah, and I know this item is needed, it's been talked about before, but, okay.
Other questions?
What's the west side sand bunker?
As the name implies, that's the sand that we use in residential areas. Currently, that is uncovered, so when we get winter precipitation, we actually have to send people up into that frozen salt pile to chip it apart before we can load it up into the trucks. Putting a cover over that would make sure that I don't have to expose employees to liability of crawling on the sand pile to break it up before we load it into the vehicles.
Okay.
Save us time.
That sounds dangerous.
It is.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah.
Dan, you've got, our Director Ditchite, you have the park solar project. Could you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so originally what was approved as part of the Bay Beach funding, the historic pavilion renovations, was to do a solar project at Bay Beach Amusement Park. After we did some research, we found out that that wasn't feasible due to the structural integrity of the building and what we'd have to do to the actual framing of the building itself. So instead, we selected an alternate solar project, which we're proposing to do at JBS as part of the new JBS development. So we have solar panels built into the bid documents as an alternate, and that will help, power the building and our needs out at JBS.
And technology life cycle?
That's IT.
I
IT?
can speak to that, or we can have Director Wilkhead talk to it. That is just some additional laptop computers, correct?
Yeah, when COVID happened, we went from directors, the only ones having laptops, to giving it to everyone, so they could work in hybrid, work at home. So that throws off our rotation of every 4 to 5 years replacement. We have all of these coming due, 4 to 5 in the next year or two. So this will give us a chance to kind of buffer and spread that out over the next 4 years and get back onto a regular
Okay, so
schedule.
technology life cycle is replacement of
Yeah,
equipment.
yeah.
Okay, I thought, I was curious.
I'm comfortable with this one, so I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
I just want to point out the dollar savings in the fire mattresses.
I know, what was that all about?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 5, for consideration with possible action to approve staff recommended reallocation of the ARPA grant economic impact for a total allocation of $13,695 and or $1,519.23 and entering MOU for corresponding reallocations as needed. Staff?
Same story here. We have some programs that spent few more dollars than were allocated, some that are underspent. You have a couple new items that have been added to the program to reallocate the dollars here. But same story as the last one.
Okay, questions?
So can I ask about the
Yeah, Alder.
barricades now?
Yes.
DPW.
It's much more than the draft. Several years ago, as part of a security overhaul that we did in cooperation with police and fire, we acquired what are known as a Meridian barricading system. They're the large steel plates that are rolled out into the street. You often see them at the farmer's market each week, securing the farmer's market. Those were state-of-the-art technology for the time that they were purchased, but they are not very easily deployable, and they are not meant to be deployed and picked up at the frequency that they are currently being picked up and deployed at. We are starting to incur significant expense in trying to maintain and keep those operational. So last year, Chief Davis had the chief from Waukesha come up and give us a security briefing on some of the initiatives that Waukesha has utilized since the incident they had down there, and we learned of a more modular system that Waukesha uses. We got in contact with that vendor, brought them up, had a in-person demonstration of that system, through AST systems, and what we're looking at is supplementing and somewhat replacing the Meridians with a more modular system that's easier and less physically demanding on staff to deploy. So there'll be a better system, and then we can hold the Meridians back for longer-term installations, such as if the cruise ships come back, where we can deploy them and leave them up for weeks at a time as opposed to hours.
Okay.
They will also fill in and be utilized completely during the draft, but it's much more than the draft.
Okay, thanks.
Elder Gavin, sorry, do you have?
No, I'm
Oh.
just gonna make a motion if there's no.
Can I ask about the public safety initiatives for 36,000 PD?
Sure. So that includes things like, for the last few years, we've had ARPA money, and then we had the state Safer Communities money last year to fund overtime to up staff and patrol in the summer when we're busier than normal, and also to provide officers targeted in downtown, some traffic safety work, although we do get a lot of state traffic safety grant money for that as well. And then in like parks, where we were having issues a couple years ago with bad behavior in some of our parks when we're trying to, park programming. And then we also anticipate in 2026 using some of that for things related to the draft, but not in the footprint. So for example, we'll need police presence if, for example, on, just not saying this is going to happen, but let's say Washington Street or Broadway wants to have close the streets and have a hospitality area related to the draft. That's so far away from Lambeau Field that that's not really part of the draft, but we anticipate some expenses to provide police service at things like that. And so it gives us some flexibility to target some resources where we need them.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one other question then on the tourism grants. I see that's almost doubling.
Right, so that is one of our more popular programs, and we do anticipate additional requests coming in associated with the draft.
Matt, I assume this would be due to the curb appeal grants?
Correct.
Yeah, can you talk to me, like, part of me struggles with this, right? Because I fear that we're just kind of reimbursing people for something they may have done anyway, or the other side, and what I'm looking for you to maybe validate, I think of like the facade grant, right? Where the facade grant's meant to make property owners upgrade what they would have done, right? To comply with something that we'd like to see. Are you seeing that with the curb appeal grant, or is it just reimbursing someone for something they would have already done? Like, how is that really taking effect?
I believe it's encouraging people to do projects they may not have done otherwise. I'm sure there's some cases where somebody would have done a project regardless, but I think with folks knowing that this opportunity is available, it encourages them to do more than they would have otherwise.
Okay, and then as far as the, like, Great Being Home, flooded home grants, home improvement loans, I assume it's just because people aren't fully taking advantage of them, or?
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the case.
Okay.
Great programs, but just the money is not moving as nearly as quickly as we would have expected or hoped. In the case of the flooded home grants, we've done a ton of marketing, being out in those neighborhoods, talking with neighborhood associations, advertising the programs, but they're just not being applied for.
And I don't think anyone's expecting you're always going to hit a grand slam, right? But I'm happy that we're trying them, right? And we're making that opportunity available. And I said this, and when we passed ARPA the first time, like, there's something here that benefits every nook and cranny of our community. And I think that's important. So.
Well, and wasn't the home improvement one limited to certain areas of the city? I mean, that had some restrictions.
Yeah, many of these programs have restrictions, whether it's the qualified census tract being the case, or just the individual, the household being a lower or moderate income household. The home improvement loan program is very popular. One of the challenges we've had is a lot of folks have had trouble getting contractors And so that's one of the primary reasons why that particular program hasn't moved as quickly.
Okay.
Can we open up the flooded home grants? Can we change some of the parameters to make it more accessible? Maybe a lot of people are applying, but they don't qualify because of income or things like that. Is there any way we can be flexible with that? If there have been people that have shown interest, that they can take advantage of it? I mean, if not, fine. I mean, I know the feds and everybody gets those rules, but.
You know, I would say it's probably staff's opinion that it's one of our more flexible programs. There isn't a grant match to that one.
But we did mailings to the houses in those
Yeah.
areas. If they ignore it, I mean, I've put out stuff on social media. I know you folks
Yeah.
have. If they're not taking advantage of it, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but
That's exactly right. You know, I think if we had more recent flooding incidents, people would be going after this money, but unfortunately, 2019 is just
too far away.
too far away.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
Entertain a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 6, for consideration of possible action to request for the purchasing department to contract natural gas before the current contract expires and report out after contract activation.
To approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Number 7, for consideration with possible action to update City of Green Bay's procurement manual to raise the common council approval level from $25,000 to $50,000 and corresponding changes.
What I can tell you is we also have the procurement manager on the line, but the $25,000 has been in place for a very long time, and we are just trying to get in line with the state procurement manual.
I thought we changed that not long ago. I thought it was 10,000.
It was 10,000, and we went up to 25,000 a couple of years ago. That is correct.
Yeah. So how many transactions do we have that fall in this 25 to 50,000 range?
Again, I can let the procurement manager talk to that, but today when we were talking to staff, they went back, and it probably would have been for probably 2023, somewhere around 15 to 20 transactions. So far this year, probably would have been 8 of them that would have fallen in that window that you would not have
Yeah.
come through committee.
And again, for the benefit of Alder Hinkvist especially, right? But like, any contract that's more than $25,000 has to come here for approval, right? So what this is saying is now the threshold is 50,000, and anything under 50, staff has the discretion to decide based on the budget.
Based on the budget.
There has to be a funding source.
Right.
And it's just that we still have to come back if it's over that dollar amount for approval. If there is no funding source, it will still have to come back to this committee.
Right.
But instead of having to get our permission to move ahead, we trust staff to make the right decisions
Yeah.
to move ahead with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when this was 10,000, I mean, there were so many things coming in. In fact, I think I'm the one that might have put that communication in to raise it, but it's, like, I'm knowing that you're only talking about 8 to 12 transactions. I think almost all of these are routine authorizations.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Informational, 2024 contingency account, $230,788. Any questions?
Move to adjourn.
Second? Can I? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we are adjourned.
Thank you all for attending.
Okay.